she said. "Do you really think you're the only one?" That was a sentence that cracked something inside me in a way I didn't even know was possible. If you've ever heard someone you love laugh at your pain, you know it doesn't feel like anger. It feels like disbelief. As if your entire sense of reality suddenly shattered and someone stuck their hand in your chest just to see what you would do. I remember sitting there in the mediator's office. Evan Miller, 36, husband for 7 years. Supposedly a grown adult who'd built a stable life with a woman he trusted more than anyone, and across from me was Alyssa, 33, my wife. Or whatever we were at that point. Something between roommates and strangers. The conference room looked like every depressing mediation room in America. Beige walls. Fluorescent lights that flickered every few seconds. Air that smelled faintly like old paperwork and lukewarm coffee. Nothing dramatic. Nothing cinematic. Just the kind of place where marriages go to die quietly. The mediator, this guy named Harold, was going over asset division in that monotone voice people use when they've repeated the same script 1,000 times. And Alyssa, leaning back in her chair like she was bored in line at the DMV, suddenly cut him off. "Can we skip the boring part and just get to what I deserve?" I didn't react. Not yet. I'd learned to sit still around her these last 2 years like she was a sleeping animal that might bite if you moved too fast. She went on, "Come on. This marriage has been dead forever." Harold adjusted his glasses, trying to look professional while clearly wishing he was anywhere else. I kept my voice calm. "Sure, let's talk about what's fair." Alyssa smirked like she'd already won something. Finally, some common sense. That was when I slid the first folder across the table. The bait, I guess. Not the real thing. Just the part of me that still wanted to walk away with some dignity, even if she didn't deserve that courtesy. She opened it, skimmed a page, and for a moment seemed genuinely pleased. "You're giving me the house and keeping the condo?" She actually laughed. "Wow. You really loved me, didn't you?" Something stung at the back of my ribs. I kept my voice even. "I did." She looked at me like that made me pathetic, then said the sentence that detonated something inside me. "You really think you were the only one who felt that way?" A beat. The mediator fidgeted. "What?" I asked, even though part of me already knew what was coming. She gave this dismissive little giggle the tone women use in sitcoms when they're mocking a clueless husband. "Oh, Evan, come on. You can't be that naive. You think you were the only guy who thought I was special, who thought I was his everything. God, you men are predictable." Every second of her laughing felt like a slap. 7 years, and that was what she thought of me. Predictable, naive, replaceable. That's when I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the real folder, the one thick enough to make a sound when it hit the table. "You're right," I said quietly. "I did think you were my everything." Past tense. The folder slid toward her. She opened it. I watched her face shift, first annoyed, then confused, then pale as chalk. Harold leaned over. "What is this?" "Private investigator's report," I said. 8 months of surveillance. For affair partners, dates, times, locations, photographic evidence. Alyssa's hands shook. "You had me followed." "I had my wife followed," I corrected. "When she came home at midnight smelling like someone else's cologne. When she started locking her phone for the first time in 7 years. When she suddenly worked late 3 nights a week at a job that doesn't have overtime." Harold flipped through the pages, eyebrows rising higher by the second. "That's my "This is invasion of privacy," Alyssa snapped. "No," I shook my head. "My lawyer confirmed everything's legal. No expectation of privacy in public spaces, hotel parking lots, or shared vehicles." She slammed the folder shut. "I want a new mediator. This is ridiculous. You're just trying to make me look bad." "I'm showing documentation of infidelity," I said, "which directly affects asset division and support in this state." Harold cleared his throat like he was choking on the awkwardness of existence. "Perhaps we should take a short break," but it was too late. Alyssa was already standing, purse in hand. "This is harassment," she said. "You're pathetic." You think this changes anything? I'll get a lawyer who destroys you." She stormed out, slamming the door so hard, the fake plant in the corner shuddered like it suddenly developed emotions. Harold looked at me. "That was unexpected." "For you, maybe," I said. I already knew about the affairs, just not the laughter part. He rubbed his forehead. "You'll want to get this to your attorney." "Already did." "What you saw was the summary. The full report is 63 pages. His eyebrows shot up. 63. Timeline, phone logs, receipts. She charged the hotel rooms to the credit cards I paid off. He gave a low whistle. Never seen someone that confident right before a cliff like that. I packed my folders. She thought I was too stupid to notice or too weak to act. Now she knows different. I left the beige room behind me. But her laugh followed. The next week turned into something I can only describe as psychological whiplash. Day 1, she called me 36 times. 36 voicemails ranging from apologetic to angry to sobbing to threatening and then back to apologetic. I didn't answer a single one. Forwarded everything to my lawyer. Then her lawyer called mine, claiming the pie evidence was illegal. My lawyer sent over the licensing documentation and relevant case law. They shut up for 6 hours. Then came phase 2, entitlement. Thursday night, 8 p.m, someone pounded on my apartment door. I checked the peephole. Of course, her mother. I cracked the door open an inch. "How dare you humiliate my daughter?" she shrieked. "I haven't humiliated anyone," I said. "I documented infidelity for divorce proceedings. You hired someone to stalk her. It's called evidence collection. You're destroying her reputation." "No," I said calmly. "She destroyed her own reputation with 4 affairs." Her face turned beet red. She was vulnerable. "You were never home, never paying attention to her needs." I actually laughed. Couldn't help it. "Ma'am, I was working because your daughter quit her job 2 years ago to find herself, and apparently she found 4 different men. You'll regret this," she hissed. "My daughter deserves better than you. Then maybe one of her boyfriends can start paying her bills." Her jaw dropped. "You cold-hearted, good night." I closed the door. She screamed through it for 5 more minutes before stomping away. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. "We need to talk, please. Just us." Screenshot. Forwarded to lawyer. His reply, "Don't respond." The next morning, her attorney filed an emergency motion claiming I was withholding funds. My lawyer called me practically laughing. "She has $8,000 in her personal account, which you paid into monthly." Yep. "And she's claiming poverty." Yep. God, this is going to be fun. We pulled her bank statements. She'd spent thousands on restaurants and hotels that lined up perfectly with the pie timeline. Her lies started collapsing like cheap drywall in a hurricane. Although she wasn't done yet, she called my parents. Told them I had been abusive, controlling, dangerous. My mom, God bless that woman, called me sobbing. "Evan, is any of this true?" "No, Mom. She's trying to flip the narrative." I sent them the pie summary. My dad called back an hour later, voice tight, "Son, Jesus Christ." My mom got on the line, furious. "She tried to make us think you were abusive." "That's not fine," I sighed. "I know." Then her sister called. "Maybe you two can just talk things out." "No. But she loves you. She loves my wallet." "That's cruel. For affairs isn't a mistake, it's a hobby." I hung up. By the time the temporary support hearing came, Alyssa had fully committed to the role of fragile, financially abused wife. Hair in a neat bun, conservative dress, minimal makeup like she was auditioning for a Hallmark movie. Her lawyer made a dramatic speech about how I isolated her and left her without money for basic needs. Then my lawyer stood up, presented the bank statements, the pie timeline, and pointed out the $300 hotel charges on nights she claimed to be visiting family. The judge stared at Alyssa like she was a faulty IKEA lamp someone was trying to return. Motion denied. Alyssa's face flamed red. She whispered angrily to her lawyer, but he shook his head like even he knew this play was over. Outside, she cornered me in the parking lot. "You're really doing this?" she said, stepping closer. "You're really going to destroy me over a few mistakes?" "For affairs," I repeated, "not mistakes. I was lonely," she snapped. "Get a hobby." "Not for boyfriends. You think you're perfect." "No, but I stayed faithful." "That's kind of the bare minimum." She leaned in, voice venomous. "You're going to pay for this." "Maybe," I said, "but not through spousal support." "You think you're funny, I think I'm done." She glared at me with this mix of hatred, fear, and disbelief, as if she still hadn't processed that I wasn't the weak, predictable husband she'd assumed. But that was the moment right there. In a courthouse parking lot in suburban Illinois, when I realized part one of this nightmare wasn't about the betrayal. It was about the transformation. My transformation. The moment I stopped being her safety net. The moment she realized I wasn't the one being destroyed. She was. You'd think that after everything, the courthouse drama, the lies collapsing, the final decree, my life would feel empty, like the aftermath of a storm that wiped everything clean. But it didn't. It just felt real for the first time in years. The quiet that settled afterward wasn't loneliness. It was oxygen. I started noticing things I hadn't noticed in forever, like how peaceful my condo sounded without her constant suspicion humming underneath every conversation. For weeks, I kept waiting for Alyssa to pull one last stunt. People like her don't usually leave your life with the dignity of a clean exit. They claw. They scratch. They try to rewrite the ending. But nothing came. No threats. No guilt paragraphs. No midnight meltdown voicemails. Just silence. And that silence taught me more about her than all the chaos ever did. Without the noise she used to generate, my brain finally rebooted. I got back into the gym, partly to burn off stress and partly because feeling strong again felt like reclaiming territory inside myself. At work, everyone noticed the shift. My boss joked that I looked like a man who escaped something, and honestly, he wasn't wrong. I didn't explain the details. I didn't need to. The promotion came 2 weeks later. And for once, I didn't feel like I was succeeding in spite of my home life. I felt like I was succeeding because I'd finally stopped bleeding energy into a relationship that only took and never returned. The cats adjusted instantly, which made me laugh. Animals always know. They settled into this calm, warm version of life, like they'd been waiting for it. Some nights I'd sit on the couch with them curled beside me and think, this is what home is supposed to feel like. When I met Lauren, it wasn't fireworks or adrenaline or desperation. It was something steadier, something honest. She was sharp, asked real questions, and didn't flinch when I told her the truth about what I'd been through. She didn't treat me like a victim or a project, just a person. And maybe because she'd survived her own heartbreak, she understood the way trust grows back slowly, like a stubborn plant pushing through damaged soil. When she asked if Alyssa might ever come back to haunt my life, I told her the truth, maybe, but she doesn't get to climb inside my head anymore. And I meant it. So when Alyssa eventually texted me from an unknown number some messy apology about ruining everything, begging me not to ignore her, I didn't feel anger or nostalgia or even curiosity. I felt clarity. A clean, definitive no. I blocked the number before my brain could try to make it complicated. It wasn't closure. It was just an ending, the kind that doesn't come with applause or a final confrontation. Just a quiet door clicking shut. A few days later, the PI's final invoice showed up with that small handwritten note, asterisk, glad I could help. You deserved better. Hope you find it. Asterisk, I stood there in my kitchen holding that note, realizing that I already had. Not a perfect life, not a perfect relationship, not some Hollywood happily ever, but a version of myself I thought I'd lost. A spine, a voice, a future that wasn't built on fear, compromise, or constantly begging someone to treat me like a human being. My past wasn't a ghost anymore. It was just a lesson, and expensive one. Sure, but one that taught me the price of tolerating the wrong kind of love, and the value of walking away before it destroys you. And as strange as it sounds, that was the first time I genuinely felt free. I used to think the end of a marriage came with some dramatic final moment, doors slamming, screaming, an explosive confession, something you could point at and say, yes, that's when everything collapsed. But real endings are quieter. They slip in through the cracks long before you notice them, and by the time you realize it, the damage is already done. After blocking Alyssa's number, I honestly thought that was it, done, finished, filed away like those divorce documents in my drawer. But endings don't arrive cleanly, not when someone like her is involved. People who thrive on chaos don't accept peace as a conclusion. They see it as an unfinished argument. So when mutual friends told me she'd been spiraling, burning through her settlement money, fighting with her mum, bouncing between temporary jobs, I wasn't shocked. Not even a little. She'd always lived like consequences were optional. What did surprise me, though, was how little emotion I felt hearing about it. No satisfaction, no anger, just distance, like hearing news about a stranger who happened to share a history with me. Meanwhile, my own life was settling into something calmer, predictable in the best way. Work was steady. My place felt like home. The cats had claimed the warmest spots in the condo like tiny, furry dictators. And Lauren Shea was becoming more of a constant than I ever intended. I wasn't expecting someone stable, someone who communicated, someone who asked how my day was and actually listened. One night after dinner at her place, we were sitting on her couch, sipping wine, and she said something that stuck with me longer than it should have. Do you ever think about the version of yourself you had to be to survive that marriage? I had never phrased it that way, but she was right. I had become a quieter version of myself, a smaller version, a man who apologized for things he didn't do, a man who avoided conflict because conflict always turned into manipulation, guilt, or punishment, a man who thought being steady meant being silent. I stared at the glass in my hand before answering. I think I got used to shrinking. She placed her hand over mine, warm, steady, grounded. Don't shrink with me. That sentence hit deeper than I wanted it to. And I realized then that healing wasn't just about blocking numbers or closing bank accounts or repainting walls. Healing was learning how to take up space again. But of course, the universe has timing that's both inconvenient and painfully accurate. And just when I started to feel like my life was realigning, Alyssa found a new way to crash into it. It started with a message from her sister, someone I wasn't expecting to hear from again. She's not doing well, she said. She's lost. She realizes now what she lost. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care enough, but because I cared exactly the right amount, 0. But her sister wasn't done. She's blaming herself now. She says she ruined everything. I didn't take the bait. If Alyssa was finally confronting the truth, good. But that didn't mean I owed her my time, my forgiveness, or my emotional labor. Then came the second message. She says she wants to apologize. Just to talk. Just once. I deleted that one without replying. Because here's the thing. Apologies aren't currency you trade in to buy back the past. And remorse doesn't erase the damage done. But the third message, that one made me pause, not because it was persuasive, but because of how predictable it was. She says you'll regret ignoring her. She says she knows you still have feelings. There it was, the old Alyssa, returning like a shadow. The entitlement, the assumption that she still lived somewhere in my emotional landscape. But she didn't, not anymore. So when the text from the unknown number came later that night, I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. I deleted it without reading. I chose silence again, and silence felt like freedom. Days passed. Work piled up. I got coffee with Ryan. I helped Lauren assemble a bookshelf that should have taken 30 minutes, but ended up being a full 2-hour existential crisis. And for a little while, everything felt normal. Until I ran into someone I absolutely didn't expect. One of Alyssa's affair partners. Not the longest one. Not the one who'd tried to message me online. A different one, the guy from the hotel receipts on Thursdays. I saw him in line at a grocery store of all places, holding a carton of oat milk and staring at the cereal aisle like he was contemplating his life choices. He recognized me before I could look away. His face shifted panic, embarrassment, something like guilt. "Evan," he said. I didn't answer. Didn't want to. But he stepped closer anyway. "Listen, man. I'm sorry." I kept my tone flat. "For what? The oat milk or the adultery?" He winced. "I didn't know she was married. You did." His eyes dropped. "Yeah, I did." There was a pause. A long one. "She told me you were cold," he said, "that you didn't care about her. That you two were basically separated." I let out a humorless laugh. "And that made it okay." He opened his mouth like he wanted to defend himself, then closed it again. "You're right," he murmured. "I messed up. I should have felt anger. Something hot. Something vindictive. But instead, what I felt was nothing. Not forgiveness. Not hatred. Just emptiness. Like standing in a room where the echoes had finally stopped. I didn't say anything else. I just walked past him, paid for my groceries, and left. And that silence, that refusal to engage, felt better than any confrontation could have. The next day, Lauren and I met for dinner, and she noticed immediately that something was off. "You look like you saw a ghost," she said. I shrugged. Maybe I did. She studied my face with that sharp, attorney-like intuition of hers. "Does it bother you?" "No," I said truthfully. "It just reminded me how far away from that life I am now." She smiled, small, soft, understanding. Good, and for the first time, I believed it. Days went by. Then weeks. And Alyssa? The updates slowed. The messages stopped. Her sister stopped reaching out. Her mother stopped screaming into the digital void. Even mutual friends learned to stop bringing her up. It was like she'd finally exhausted every method of pulling me back into her gravity, and I had finally drifted into a different orbit entirely. The funny thing is, healing doesn't happen in big moments. It happens in the small ones. Drinking coffee without checking your phone for drama. Buying new sheets that no longer carry someone else's scent. Laughing with someone who doesn't weaponize your vulnerability. Waking up one day and realizing your chest feels lighter. One evening, I sat on my couch with the cats curled beside me. The condo warm and calm, Lauren texting me a picture of her dinner gone wrong. And I realized something so simple it almost made me laugh. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of being alone. Not of being lied to. Not of the past haunting me. Alyssa had become exactly what she should be. An old chapter. Dog-geared and closed, gathering dust on a shelf I no longer visited. And me. I was becoming someone new. Someone fuller. Someone real. Healing wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, steady, a slow rebuilding of the self I'd forgotten I was allowed to be. And if there was one thing I knew with absolute clarity, it was this. I would never shrink myself for anyone again. Not ever. Not for love. Not for fear. Not for the ghost of a woman who once laughed at my devotion like it was a joke. Part 3 wasn't about surviving Alyssa anymore. It was about outgrowing her. Completely. Forever.